Hello and welcome to Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week, where this year we are marking year 10 with our theme, A Decade of Voices. My name is Eve Canavan, I'm co-founder of the Awareness Week, and today I'm really pleased to be joined by our friend Jade, who'll be discussing her personal experience of postpartum psychosis and her recovery. Hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so pleased to have you. I'm so pleased to have you. We'll go into our talk in just a minute and why we invited you along, but I am delighted that you're here. And you're truly representative of a decade of voices and sharing your experience. So we'll kick into the questions in just a minute. But before we go on, this information session, as with all of our others, is purely for that. Jade is going to be sharing her personal experience of postpartum psychosis, but neither of us are healthcare professionals. Anything that we talk about today should not take place or take over, excuse me, any information that's given to you by your own healthcare professional, be your GP, your psychiatrist, your consultant, your health visitor, or your midwife. And with that, let's begin. Hiya, you.
Hello.
It's so
Oh,
nice to have you here.
I'm really looking forward to it.
So, a lot of people might have seen Jade over social media over the last few months, and rightly so. Um, Jade has been talking about her personal experience of postpartum psychosis and sharing it so eloquently and so vividly in a lot of places with our friend Giovanna on Happy Mum, Happy Baby, and I've seen you in lots of places. Jade and I have a shared experience of postpartum psychosis. I also experienced it 16 years ago and was in a mother and baby unit. And we both do work with the fantastic organisation Action for Postpartum Psychosis. But today is about Jade and talking about her experience, what she's gone through, how she's using her experience for good, and where things are now. And I could not think of anyone nicer, more brighter, more lovely to invite on for year 10, where we're talking about the real voices of real people who've been poorly after having a baby, than to have you here, Jade.
Oh, thank you. That just gave me shivers. That's so sweet.
It's true. It's so true. And you're so nice. I
Oh.
think that's the thing.
Oh, that's really lovely. Thank you. And likewise, like you're definitely someone when I started this journey that I really looked up to and gave me that confidence to like share my story and for it to be okay. And not feel shame. So thank you.
Oh, no, no, honestly, it's when that's very kind of you to say, but I think it's this continuous thing of people continuously sharing their story. So 16 years ago, I had
Mhm.
never heard of postpartum psychosis and didn't know anyone going through it. And when I went to my mother and baby unit, didn't have any clue of like what on earth was going on. And I am so grateful that all these years on, there are beautiful voices like yours that are speaking out and making women feel that there is no shame, that these things do
Yeah.
happen. And there aren't as little of us as people think. It's not as rare as people think. And I think
No.
Jade and I met each other for the first time a few weeks ago at the Glow Mama Awards, where she rightfully won a fantastic award for being was it a voice was it a voice for change?
Yeah, yeah, it
Yay.
was.
Yay. And I think that just gives it's a real testament to the work that you're doing and the space that you're holding, which is why I wanted to have you on today. So with that, I kind of want to hand it over to you. We've got a few questions that we've pre-prepared, which we always do to make sure that Jay's comfortable with us talking about them. So I wondered if we
Mhm.
could start off with you talking about your personal experience of postpartum psychosis, but kind of how it started. So you're
Mhm.
pregnant? Did anyone ever tell you about perinatal mental illness? Had you heard of postpartum psychosis? And when did things first start happening after having your baby?
Yeah, so yeah, I had no idea about postpartum psychosis. I knew about depression, but I didn't even really know that like postnatal anxiety was a thing, OCD. Um, so to be honest, I went into motherhood quite blind as to what could happen to my mental health. Um, there was no information around if you do suffer with your mental health, this is who you need to contact. You've got a perinatal mental health service. So I think when I was starting to really struggle, I just had no clue as to where to really turn. And unfortunately for me, everywhere I did turn and every time I'd asked for help in those first 4 months, after having Penelope, I just experienced pushback, um, and told that you're fine. You just like either you've got baby blues or let's not put a label on it. And each time it just got brushed to the side, and to the point that I even said to my health visitor, like, I've had suicidal thoughts, and she just really didn't listen or give signpost me to where I needed to go. Um, so it was a real challenge, and I think ultimately, like, it's really hard for me in my experience. The 4 months after having my daughter, it's hard to know whether the psychosis had started long before my first psychotic episode. Um, I think there's sometimes a little bit of overlap, maybe. Like, I think the way that I've kind of described it to people that have asked, I've said it felt like it started off as anxiety, then developed into depression, and then the psychotic symptoms started to come through, along with OCD. And so there was all these like elements of mental health that was it was almost like forming a cocktail, and then um it just exploded. Like, it was really hard, and it for the probably the week building up to my first psychotic episode, I can really now look back and think there were some telltale signs in there, like not being able to sleep, then feeling like I didn't need to sleep. I was very manic, and then I'd be really high, then I'd be really low. Um, and I think at the same time as well, I was really trying to fight what was happening. Um, and because I didn't know what psychosis, what postpartum psychosis was, I wasn't able to recognize the signs myself. And even to my family and my husband, like, he did that, they didn't know either, so they didn't know what signs to look out for. And I think that kind of ties into why I'm sharing my story now, is ultimately it's my main goal was for people that are in recovery from postpartum psychosis, because I really struggled coming out of it and not seeing anything, not trying to understand and make sense of what had happened. And I want to be that person to, validate people's feelings, make them feel less alone, and then show them that there is hope and that there is recovery, and it doesn't have to define you going forward. Um, but also, it's to reach the people that are pregnant, the people that have loved ones around them that are pregnant, so and are about to have babies or have just had a baby, to really bring it to the forefront and not be scared by it. Like, it's obviously a scary thing, and no one wants to go through it. No one wants to witness anyone go through it. But it's if you're able to recognize signs and understand what is potentially happening to yourself or to a loved one, it's, just by seeing my post or looking at what yourselves share, and all the different amazing charities, what they share, if we can just then potentially save a mum from getting so severe and getting the help that they need, like, I think that that is just so valuable. Um, but in terms of like, when did I realize, or when did everyone around me realize that I was really unwell? It was like, I've kind of shared this in like multiple places, but um I was feeding my daughter in the middle of the night, and I went to put her back into her next to me, but I left her in the bed, turned around to my husband to hug him, and he was like, "Oh, where's Penelope?" And then I just had this complete out of body experience where I just flung myself backwards, started laughing, and like landed on Penelope for just a split second, like, and then I shot up and jumped out of bed and then started singing Ordinary People by John Legend, and then hallucinating that I was on stage and I was John Legend. And obviously at that point it was clear to my husband that something wasn't right. And from that point onwards, for about 2 weeks, I was in and out of acute psychosis. The next day after that first psychotic episode, I was admitted to a mother and baby unit. and then I was able to receive the treatment that I needed. Um, so yeah, it was a whirlwind, and I think it was because we didn't know that this was a possibility. I think it really threw myself and my family members and friends. So I think it's so important to be doing things like this and for what you do with Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week, just to get the word out there that this is a possibility. Like it's a highly likely it's not going to happen, but and in case of an emergency, this is what like this is where you need to go for the help. So yeah, that's kind of my story into where I am today.
Thank you for sharing it, and genuinely, because I think it's a really vulnerable space to talk about something that you've gone through, something that is so, you hear lots of words like dramatic, overwhelming, but it is to yourself. You're a real person who's gone through this, and it's had an impact on your family and those around you. And there's been a huge recovery process since it. So a huge thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable. And you've answered a few of the questions I was going to ask you, which is about, how did you navigate this and how did your family navigate this? So let's go into it a little bit more. As Jade says, the stats are a bit wishy-washy and no one really knows as to why postpartum psychosis actually really, really happens. But we know around 1 in every 1,000 births, a woman will experience postpartum psychosis. And I remember, I think I was diagnosed when Joe was 6, 7 weeks or something. But I had the merry-go-round of going to every single GP and casualty in the entirety of London, no knowing what was wrong with me. And I think there'll be people
Oh,
at home who actually really, really correlate with that story, Jade, not just with psychosis, but actually in those first few weeks when people think they really are starting to navigate a severe perinatal mental illness of the what on earth is going on with me. The majority of people have
yeah.
maybe heard of postnatal depression, but nothing more. And we know that in
Mhm.
antenatal groups, postpartum psychosis isn't talked about heavily or even at all in large amounts of them. And so women and
Mhm.
families are going into this kind of completely blind. And I think there is that you've shown a kind of real vulnerability in talking about some of your first symptoms there, where I think it's like there is that thing. I think sometimes people are a bit afraid to be light-hearted or go, sorry, what was that, when you talk about what you've gone through. And I think
Yeah.
the flip from kind of, doing something that is deemed as normal in those first days of parenthood, putting your child down in a crib or a cot or a sleeping pod or something like that, and then
Mm.
flipping into what is now known as a symptom of postpartum psychosis, as you so vividly talk about, I think is
Mhm.
really important. Because I was going to say to you, how did your partner and your family navigate through this? And you've talked about it, how the flip happened so quickly and how no one was really aware of.
Mhm.
Of what was going on. I'm really
Mhm.
pleased that you were then admitted to the mother and baby unit so quickly after that happened. But how to kind
Mhm.
of were you aware of what was going on at that point, or how were things explained to you? Once your husband, who I've met and is absolutely lovely and wonderfully supportive, had thought we need to
Yeah.
get Jade some help, and you kind of went into the mother and baby unit. How were things from that point? Like, how aware were you of stuff that was going on? Did you feel like completely out of control? Like, how did your family feel?
Yeah. So for me, I didn't really understand what was happening. And like the only way that I can describe it is that feeling of feeling drunk and out of control. Um, and there were times I don't personally remember, but my husband said, particularly before I was admitted to the mother and baby unit, so the day after my psychotic episode, he said when I was in psychosis, I had a glaze over my eyes, and then when I would come out of it, it was like he was like, you were back in the room. And he said there was one point that I looked at him and I just went like, Tom, what is happening? Like, what's happened? And then before he could even explain it to me, I'd then gone back into psychosis. So it was really hard for, I think, my husband and my parents to witness, like particularly before I was in the mother and baby unit, because obviously at that point I was their sole responsibility. They had no external help. Um, and my husband did have to not really fight, but he had to be quite firm with the health professionals and say, no, like we need someone to come out today. We need someone to assess her. And I really do think that she needs to go to a mother and baby unit because I cannot keep her alive at home. And I think at this point, he had, like my sister had said, I think this might be postpartum psychosis. So obviously, my husband had started Googling it, could see that the symptoms were linking up to what was happening to me. And then of course, like one of the things from the NHS is that if you believe that someone is going through postpartum psychosis, like either call 999 or go to A&E. So for him, he was like, well, this is obviously a crisis. We need to get help immediately. Um, and someone did come out in the afternoon, assessed me and said, she does need to go to a mother and baby unit. She searched for where I could go. And luckily it was the closest one was still an hour and a quarter away, but it was better than it being, even further. So I was driven down that evening. I went there voluntarily, and then unfortunately, well, actually, I do see it as more of a fortunate thing, was that they then realized I was there involuntary and then phoned my husband, who at this point had gone home, and said, like, would we think we need to section Jade as she is not safe. Like she right now she could leave and we don't feel that she would be safe if she was to leave. So I was sectioned, which was a massive lifeline. I think that saved me, and being in the mother and baby unit saved me. And also the it also helped my family as well because it took that pressure off of them. Um, and they knew, even though it was incredibly hard for them to take me there, um, and I think they could really feel over the few weeks that I was there that I was resenting them for taking me there because I was still really unwell and I couldn't understand why I'd been taken from home and, why had this happened to me. And it wasn't kind of really it was only in 2 to 3 weeks in that I began to understand that it was postpartum psychosis. And it was actually a leaflet from Action on Postpartum Psychosis that made me understand why I was there. And because it explained it so well, and it explained it in a way that was like, this happens to other people too. Like you're not alone. And I think I took comfort in that. And I remember I like that leaflet did not leave my side until I went home. And I then took it home with me. And it was almost like my little, if I was having a moment, I would refer back to it to be like, oh, okay, like this is what happened. And it helped me process it. Uh, so yeah, I think overall, my family, I mean, they dealt with it incredibly, and um, my husband and my parents alternated each day as to who would come and visit me. So every single day I would have someone there, um, which really helped because it made me feel less alone. Um, but it was definitely really hard. I think we all were trying to piece together like, why has this happened? Having a baby is meant to be one of the most incredible, happiest times of your lives. Like that's what we're fed. And then when that doesn't happen, and when something happens like that, when you've like yearned to be a mum and you thought that you were going to take to it so well, but you then find it incredibly difficult and um you've then become so unwell that you've been hospitalized and you're learning all this different information about like I remember just being like I'm having to teach myself like what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, what's like you know what is postpartum psychosis, what's made that different to postnatal depression. And then I don't know if you experience the same, like the postnatal depression that follows
Mhm.
is so intense as well. So it's a long process. But yeah, I mean, the support once I kind of hit crisis from the NHS. And um yeah, for me was like I couldn't have done it without them. And even up until now, I'm still supported. And then I know we're going to touch on it as to what Action on Postpartum Psychosis do, but like they've been like incredible as well. Like I just couldn't thank them enough.
Do you know what? I think there's so much that I could unpick from there, Jade. I just think I'm so pleased that you got the help when you needed it. And I think that is what is so wonderful about mother and baby units. And we've got in our resource guide, and I'll make sure when we share this session that next to it, I put up the resource guide that I've made and what an MBU is. So mother and baby units are
Mhm.
psychiatric inpatient units with about 6 to 8 beds each. There was only a few of them a few years ago. There's much more now. I think it's hitting 20 or 21. I can't remember off the top of my head. And they offer women from 32 weeks of pregnancy up until the end of the first year who are suffering from severe perinatal mental illness. And they are incredibly safe, warm places for you to go to. They don't look like the psychiatric ward you see in the films and all those scary things.
No.
As I was like caught down, Jade, I remember going, I can smell burning. Of course, nothing was burning. Burning was one of my big things
Yeah.
that I thought I could smell constantly, you know. And I was like, I can smell burning, the hospital's on fire. And John was like, the hospital's not on fire, Eve. Come on, we're going down to the unit. And I was like, there's going to be plastic sheets and all these, all these kind of things. And my mum was like
Yeah.
terrified what it's going to look like. And I was like, I'm going to be chained to a bed. And of course, I went
Yeah.
in and was like, oh, and so I was in like such a state, like, I mean, I didn't have any shoes on. I can't remember what I looked like as I was walking. But I can
Yeah.
remember there was just these wonderful nurses who were like, hello, Eve, you know, come in.
Yeah.
We're going to look
Mhm.
after you. Is that kind of how you felt? Did you feel like you were going into the arms of people who wanted to look after you?
Yeah, I did. For the most part, I think when when I was like in the deep, like the depths of psychosis, like I definitely felt like, I mean, I thought I was there because I'd killed Penelope. So I thought that these people were trying to, kill me.
Yeah,
Not that they ever made me feel that they like made me feel unsafe. It was just the delusions that I was having. But ultimately, like, yeah, I did when I was kind of coming out of the psychosis. And even during the psychosis, I really did feel, I remember looking at someone like because I had to have someone with me all at all times, and I was led on the bed and she was sat at the end, and I just looked at her and I said, like, have I been brought here to sleep? And she just said, yeah. And I was like, can I go to sleep? And she was like, of course you can. And I was like, thank you so much. And then I feel like I really was like, okay, they're here to look after me. Um, and every single person there, and even now when I go back to volunteer there, they're just all like, they're just so incredible. And like the space that they've created, like, of course, it's a hospital, it still feels slightly clinical, but they've made it as homely as they can. And I think, like you said, it's not what we're fed on, like through the films. And I was waiting for someone to, put me in a straitjacket, and
yeah,
it just wasn't like that. And they look after your baby, like they take your baby away so you can sleep, or they help you to do things with your baby to help you connect. And it's it's just like it's a place where I raise awareness, and I do get people asking me, like, they're talking about me going into a mother and baby unit, and I don't want to. And I always just stress, like, it's not what you think it is. And they are in like amazing places. And yes, like most of the time you don't want to be there, but the fact that you're there with your baby, like, and they know the importance of not separating you. um, I feel really proud to say that even when I was so unwell, they didn't once worry about the safety of Penelope. Like they said, you were always really loving. And yes, there were times that I was vacant, but they like the fact that I was able to be with her and still maintain that bond to a certain degree, like, is just is incredible. I'd love for there to be more. Um, so yeah, I think overall, like I wouldn't fit, I'd want someone to take away from this conversation is like not to be afraid if there was ever talks about you going into a mother and baby unit.
And do you know what? I think you're completely right because it seems so scary. It's a totally different world. You have your baby and you're kind of there is this online, all it is and all you're thinking of is, and you've said this so beautifully, you're preparing for birth and you're thinking about the prams and the cots and the this. And I remember my mum getting the first baby grow and I think I was about 8 months pregnant or whatever, hadn't bought anything till then. And my mum was getting the first, the first kind of thing. Yeah. And, and I think and suddenly your world very quickly is thrown completely upside down. You're thrown into what is classed as a psychiatric emergency, as Jade has said. That's exactly what
Mm.
postpartum psychosis is. Yet it's something that not a lot of people know about. And your life is not just a sleepless haze. It is far beyond that. It's that and beyond. And
Mhm.
you are navigating, like Jada said, a whole new world. I think the way you've talked about her, the fact that, often so much we hear about those, those first new weeks as parents and you're learning this and you're that. Well, actually, at the moment, you're learning difference at that point between what's a psychiatrist, what's a psychologist, what's the
Yeah.
nursery nurse, what are the little pills that they give me, what's the meeting that they have once a week to talk about my care, all of these
Yeah.
things. And I think what's really struck me, I think as well, because I can remember John being so like not having a clue what was going on. What would you, and you've
Mm.
talked about Tom and kind of how much he supported you. What would you say to family members who are watching this? Because I think one of the things that I love about you, Jade, is that in the comment sections for the things that you've done, family members, friends, even employers I've been reading, and I mentioned you to Sally from Pandas yesterday on our chat, are saying, I found it so insightful to listen to you because actually they've got advice or, information from you. And I think, what would you say to family members with somebody who is experiencing postpartum psychosis, is either being considered for inpatient care or is in inpatient care, and they're really scared about the prognosis, them being as an inpatient? What would you say to them?
Um, I think it's just to trust the health professionals and the care that they're being given. Um, I think one question that my husband asked, one of the first questions he asked was, will she get better? And
Mm.
like, will I get my wife back? And they said like she will go on to make a full recovery. And I think he really held on to that. And don't get me wrong, it really was only last year that he said he got his wife back, which, that's a really long time. And I think for family members and for partners, like it's to I think firstly, you have to really try and understand the illness, like learn as much as you can about it, but also be really open in terms of accepting what has happened, and understanding that the journey to recovery is not linear. Like it's really full of bumps and twists and turns, and it doesn't sometimes necessarily make sense because you're like, wait, she was getting better, but now she's completely like she's not okay. And I think Tom hasn't said this, but I think that particularly with partners, like there's a feeling of you've lost control over and you can't fix it. There's nothing you can do as a partner or a family member that can instantly fix what they're going through. But I think giving them a space to feel comfortable and to know that they can talk to you and never brush it away. Never try. Like I had a few people say to me, but it's done now. Like let's just move on. And I remember thinking like, yeah, it might be done and for you, but this is still ongoing for me. And I need to talk about it because I need to process it. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about talking about it now, is because not only do I know that I'm helping other people, it's really helped me in terms of my recovery. And I do think that there is a correlation where my husband said, I got my wife back last year. And it was last year that I started sharing my story because it doesn't only help other people, but when they come back to me and say, I had it too, or I experienced this, or blah, like I'm able to connect to them and it makes me feel less alone whilst making them feel less alone. And I think just bringing everything together and that's where like Action on Postpartum Psychosis is amazing because they don't only just provide peer support for mums that have experienced it, they've got peer support for partners and for grandparents, and which is amazing because it's not only the mum that goes through it, it's also the families. I think for family members, it's really important for them to be able to talk about it, to have someone that they can confide in, uh, to try and process what has happened, because it's hard. Like, I can't even imagine um, watching a loved one go through it because I've, been on the front line with mums that are experienced postpartum psychosis in the mother and baby unit. And for me, that's obviously it's hard because I've gone through it, so it's almost like holding up a mirror. But it then makes me think, oh my gosh, like this is what my family were witnessing with me, and to watch a loved one be so just not there and not themselves, like it's incredibly difficult. So yeah, I think it's probably the word, if I was to like just give a word, it would be like compassion, for every single person involved.
Yeah, and I think that's that thing of you go through it yourself, but everyone around you experiences it to some degree. And I think it's when you talk about people saying, "Well, it's done now, let's move on." I think we see that quite a lot on like forums and things where it's talking about PP. People kind of think, "Oh, it's such an awful thing now," and family members or friends will say, let's move on. That's in the past." But there is an impact going forwards, and I think one of the things you talked about is, and when you get over the psychosis because psychosis can, depending on whatever, at times it can clear quite quickly with the right treatment. Everyone is very different, but there is a period after of postnatal depression or postnatal anxiety. Some people experience PTSD from the things that they've gone
Mhm.
through, and so I think you've so brilliantly talked about actually that you kind of you're still going through other things even though active psychosis may have ended, and I think that's what I want to talk about with you for a bit. What did and what does recovery look like for you, Jade?
Um, I mean, it's not like I said before, it's not linear. Uh, for me, I would say therapy has been massive. Um, Feeling safe to talk about it to my partner, to my family. Um, and I did, and like you said, you can get PTSD from it, and which I did really suffer with. I did actually have a relapse of psychosis in January 2024, so it was about 3 years later. So that kind of came with its own level of trauma. So for that, um, and for the first time, I had EMDR therapy, which for me like worked really, really well. I've heard it's worked really well for other people too. Um, and a really big thing actually, which I started in January last year, was daily gratitude. So
Okay.
every day, it's pretty much every morning. If it's not in the morning, it will be kind of halfway through the day. I'll write a list of 10 things that I'm grateful for. And I think sometimes when I say that to people, they're like, but how can you think of like 10 new things every day? And I'm like, well, it doesn't have to be a new thing. You can be the same thing every single day, but it's just practicing, it's putting your mind into a positive
Yeah.
mindset that it just really helps kind of the day go forward. It sets it up really nicely. Um, and I think especially if you do or you have experienced depression, um, it's it's easy for someone to say like just don't just focus on the positives, so like, and it's so much easier to say that than to actually do it. So by repetitively writing down things that you're grateful for, and it can be as simple as like I'm grateful for my morning coffee, or I'm grateful for the sun that's shining today, or my home, or whatever it may be. That's probably been one of the biggest things in terms of my recovery. Um, yeah, that and a lot of therapy. A lot.
And therapy's good. Therapy's okay. Like a lot of people, I
Yeah.
don't know, in this, I mean, I don't know, you see it already, don't you? I think, and we're friends, but I think I always look at my window as well because I think, I think that's one of the things how I think. I think what I've learned from therapy, she used to say to me, look away from the world, like think with yourself. So I'm really conscious that I talk like this quite a lot because I think that's one of the things that I learned because I had EMDR. I had to follow her, I had to follow Nurse Gwyneth's finger like this back and forth, and I found it revolutionary.
Yeah.
Like it was because I had a relapse of psychosis in 2013, so 3 years after Joe was born, yeah, and had EMDR, and
Oh,
it was yeah, and it was just brilliant, and like I'd never heard of it, and then I went and read about it, and I was like, this sounds nuts. I'll do it,
yeah.
yeah, I'll do it, and but I think therapy is so good, and there's so many different types of therapy, and I think and I feel like I'm constantly learning. I talk to new people who mention a new thing, and I go, "Gosh, what's that?" And like I'm
Mm,
talking to somebody about the things people go through when they experience perinatal OCD and the type of therapies exposure therapies and things you go through to work through that. And they can be therapy can be challenging, but my goodness, what you get from it is just incredibly overwhelmingly positive. And I think
yeah.
treatment looks so different for so many people, so many different ways. And I think you've been so brilliant the way you've talked about how, going into a safe place to kickstart your recovery, not knowing why you're there, being incredibly frightened. One of the reasons that you're thinking they're feeling very overwhelming,
Mhm.
you've talked about one of the reasons that you thought being there, something that around Penelope, and then coming through it, and your family working with that, and then having therapy and then working through and how a relapse can happen and how there's good and bad days, but always holding on to that idea, that actually there is this recovery at the end and that you can and do get
Mhm.
better. And I think you've
Yeah.
so beautifully talked about that, Jade. I think you so beautifully talked about that because I think there's quite a lot of misconceptions about postpartum psychosis. I think
Yeah.
when I did EastEnders, I remember I got a message from someone
Mhm.
and they were like, please, Eve, please say Stacey's character's not going to kill their baby. And I was like, do you know how
Oh.
massively rare that
Yeah.
is? And I was like, why is that the first thing someone comes about? And I think you see often these kind of really awful headlines about postpartum psychosis and stuff like that. And I think the reason
Mhm.
I'm so full of joy that you're sharing your story now to show that actually there these misconceptions about postpartum psychosis are what they are. We know it's incredibly scary, it's incredibly frightening,
Mhm.
and it is a psychiatric emergency for huge reasons, and we talk about them in our symptom checkers. But
Mhm.
look what comes out of it. You can survive,
Mhm.
you can recover. People go on to have other babies. There are organisations
Yeah.
that are here to help you, and there are organisations and individuals like yourself that are here that give hope to people. So I think
Yeah.
there are a lot of preconceptions and there's a lot of false ideas about what even psychosis is. People hear the word psychosis and people go,
Yeah.
oh, and
Yeah.
it is scary. But I think
Mhm.
look at the people who are speaking out about it, who have gone through it, who've experienced it, who
Mhm.
live with it, at times and think, and their life can be full of gratitude and joy, as you've talked about. And I
Mhm.
just think I was looking behind you at your photo behind you, that lovely pic. I think it's a croissant behind you wrapped up
Oh
in pic.
yeah.
And I
Oh
thought,
yeah,
how nice
it's
is that?
proper.
Because you were
Yeah.
talking, I thought, how lovely is that? And I think it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you've talked about the transition through that isn't always perfect, and it doesn't feel perfect as you're going through it. But I think you've
Mhm.
shown how recovery is a process, the process that you work on and
Yeah.
things that you work with healthcare professionals, you have your therapy, you work with organisations and charities, who give you the tools to support your recovery, and then you're doing things on your own to help that happen. And I think with that, we've
Mhm.
touched a little bit on the work of action and postpartum psychosis, but they are wonderful. So I wanted to kind of
Yeah.
wrap up at the end to talk about if people are at home
Mhm.
thinking, right, this postpartum psychosis thing, think I might have someone in my life who's experiencing it because we have people reaching out an awful lot talking about that. We've talked about
Yeah.
it's a psychiatric emergency, go to ring 999, take them to casualty, this, that,
Mhm.
and the other. However, there is this fabulous charity, APP. What do they do, Jade?
Yeah. So they are basically, I see them as like almost like a family, but
Yeah.
they are a support service that offer peer support, so through multiple different ways for mums and families who have experienced postpartum psychosis. Um, Firstly, like I don't, to be completely honest, I don't know too much about them in the sense that if you thought there were symptoms arising, like I don't know where what they can do in terms of that. I'm sure if you were worrying and you reached out to somebody from APP, they would be able to signpost you to
Yeah,
exactly
and
who
we're
you
in the
needed
caption,
to.
our signpost for their symptom guide under here.
Yeah,
Where we are
okay.
under here, our signpost for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but for me, it was the recovery that they were able to help. Like I mentioned, obviously, they've got the leaflet that they tend to have in mother and baby units. Uh, But yeah, they offer peer support. So that's which I still have, which is I do mine through email. I've had FaceTime calls with people. You can have just telephone calls. And then they also have an online forum that you can kind of participate in. And then, like I said before, they also then do it for partners of the mums and grandparents. So they really provide a space where you can just feel listened to, and they will answer any questions you might have. But then they also do incredible work with obviously raising awareness, and working with, you know, kind of policy change makers, other people that are doing maybe research projects, and they do a lot of stuff for trying to essentially create more mother and baby units so that we're able to look after mums who are suffering. So, yeah, they're an amazing charity, which obviously you would only know about if you experience postpartum psychosis for the main part. But it's a really nice charity to know about in case anybody that you know or yourselves like ever need them.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. They are driven by volunteers, women like Jade and myself who've been through it. Their website, I would say, if you go on it and you are at home thinking, right, our family are going through this at the moment, whatever stage that you're at, the website is not overwhelming. So it's not just going to the
No.
website and you're like, where do I go? What do I click on? And I think they've done this brilliant thing where it's like when you're at your most frantic time of your life, when someone in your life is poorly, and quite often people are in
Yeah.
active psychosis, they're not able to go into a website themselves. So the website is that there's simple drop downs, isn't there, Jade, where you kind of go, and
Mhm.
they've got things about symptom stuff, but Jade's really she's completely right. They've got these insider guides like how to support people, how to like
Yeah.
support for partners, support for family members, and they have stuff about if you're thinking about having another baby, the kind of support you
Yeah.
can get around that. It is so brilliant. They are a very small
Yeah.
organisation, but they are incredibly dedicated. And I think it
Hmm.
is really important that we use the week to highlight the work of organisations like them who help real families on the ground. And they are
Yeah.
driven by lived experience. So they are run by people with lived experience, volunteered
Hmm.
with by people with lived experience, and provide a real hub of hope and support for families like ours who've been through it. Oh, thank
Hmm.
you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You're so lovely. I think you've just done over the last few months, you've just done the most brilliant work, shining a light on something that not a lot of people know about, but also showing how the hope that recovery is possible. And I think that gives a real lifeline to families who are experiencing
Hmm.
this. Um,
Yeah,
I think that is recovery is possible. And yeah, so I just want to thank you
definitely.
so much for giving your voice to the week.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for everything that you do. It's honestly amazing. Very inspiring.
Oh, well, you are too. You are too. Right, I shall let you go. Thank you for this, okay? Thanks,
Thank
everybody. Bye bye.
you. Bye.